this video, the main thing I want to talk about is responding to key clicks. In a previous video, we talked about how to respond to mouse clicks, but you may also be wondering, well, how can I get the program to respond to the pressing of a given key? And another thing that we're going to cover just incidentally is an indicator or lamp indicator and how to control its color and brightness. So I made another one of these really simple apps. Let me show you that. And you can see all it's got is two things, a lamp indicator and a set of axes. And the reason I need the set of axes is because that's the only way I can detect mouse clicks. You know, when you click a mouse, it's clicking within a set of axes. So that's the reason that's there. It doesn't serve any other function in this app. So what does this do? Well, if I click the space bar, let's make sure this is in the foreground, click the space bar, the lamp changes from from green to red or back. Okay. If I press the up or down arrow key, it gets dimmer, down is dimmer, up is brighter. Okay. As you can see, I'm changing the color and brightness of the bulb. Another thing it will do, if I just click somewhere, it'll start moving. And if I hit the enter key, it'll reverse direction. And if I hit the escape key, it'll stop. All right, really simple functionality. But let's see how I did this. All right, so I have two callbacks here. One is for the mouse click, UI axis button down. And as you saw, when I clicked the mouse the first time, it started moving. And to keep track of whether it's moving or not, I used a global variable. Now, global variables are kind of falling out of fashion. There's probably a more favored way to do it, which is to make it a property of the app. But that's more complicated, so I'm going to leave that for another time. Right now, I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, which is with a global variable. So I have a global variable called moving, and in the startup function, I initialize it to false. A very common technique. You have some global variable that keeps track of what's happening in your app, and you initialize it in the startup function to some state. And another global variable called direction, so I know is it going to the right or to the left, and I initialize that to 1, which means to the right. When I click the mouse button, it sets moving to true. So whether it was moving already or not, when I click the mouse button, it definitely will be moving. And while moving, in other words, while moving is true, it's just updating the position. And you see there's a property of the object, which is where it's located, its coordinates. I'm having trouble getting this cursor to go where I want it to. Okay. So I read that property, put it in a variable just called POS, amp.lamp.position. And you see that it's actually a vector because it's got different coordinates in space. Okay. Now, since I'm always moving in the X direction, that's just the way I set up this little app, I'm interested in the first coordinate. Okay, so POS parentheses 1 is the X coordinate. And in this loop, I just increment that. Well, if it's moving in the positive direction, which is 1, then I add that. And if it's moving in the negative direction, then direction will be -1, and I'm subtracting 1. Okay. And then just to give it more of a real-time appearance, I pause for 1/10 of a second every time I move it. Okay. Now, you may be wondering, well, this says while moving, or while moving equals true, it's equivalent. How is moving ever going to get set to false? Well, that's going to happen in the other callback. Let's go look at the design view for a second. There's a subtle property here. If you look at the callbacks for the lamp, the lamps don't have callback properties. I'm looking at the wrong thing. The UI axis button down, that's the one I want. Okay. Look at the callback for the UI axes. Okay, button down function. And it has a property, is it interruptible or not? Right here. See, interruptible, and that's checked. Which means if another event occurs while the callback for this object is running, it'll get interrupted, that other callback will get executed, and then it'll come back to this. So what's happening is it's running, moving is true, then something else happens. In this case, it happens to be if I hit a return or an escape key, this other callback gets executed, and direction and or moving may get changed. Okay, so if this is running, the lamp is moving, and I hit the escape key, this callback will get executed and moving will get set to false. Then it will come back up here. Now moving is false and the loop will terminate. Okay. So that's something of a subtlety, but it's a fairly important thing to know about how these apps behave. All right, now what is this other callback? It's called UI figure key press. In other words, anytime you press a key, this will get executed. If you press any key at all, this will get executed. And you just have to determine what key did I press by looking at event.key. And I'm going to set a breakpoint here so we can look at that and see what it is. Just waiting for this app to start up. It can be a little slow sometimes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to click it. The lamp should start moving. All right, now if I hit, let's say escape. All right, so I click the key, therefore this callback is getting executed. I hit this breakpoint. So what's key? You see, it just says escape. It's just a character array with the name of the key. Now the next thing I do in this callback is I look at the color of the lamp. App.lamp.color, and I put it in a variable called RGB. And I call it that because, in fact, why is that not popping up? Let's see here. Well, we'll have to look at it in the okay. So you see it's an array of 3 values, red, green, and blue. And right now, the red is green. So the green component is set to 1, the other 2 are 0. And let's just continue. The next thing I do is I look at that key, okay, with a switch case, and depending on what key was pressed, I do different things. Space reverses the color. So now I set this up so it's always green or red. So I only have to look at the first 2. And you see what I'm doing here? I just switch the 2. Okay, what was the first one now becomes the second one and vice versa. Okay, so the red and green components switched. Now, if I do other things like the up arrow key, I want to change the brightness, which means I change the value of the red or green component depending on what the color is. So I have to look at the color and act accordingly. Well, actually, I guess the way I did it here, now that I think about it, I didn't bother looking at the color. I just changed both components. And so I didn't pay any attention to whether it was red or green. I just added or subtracted from both. However, I have to make sure I don't go outside the bounds 0 and 1. So that's what the min and max functions are doing here. They're saying add 0.1 to it, but then if it goes above 1, just set it to 1. And likewise, when I'm decreasing, subtract 0.1. And if it goes below 0, just set it to 0. If I click return, that's when it reverses direction. So I just have a reference to the global variable direction here. And remember, with global variables, you have to have this global declaration in every function that uses it. Okay, so this global variable was created back here in the startup function. This function is also using that global variable, so it also has to have that declaration. All right, so if I hit return, I just change the sign of direction. If I hit escape, that means it's supposed to stop moving, so I set moving equals false. And I also have a Q, which is the quit key. If I click a Q, whether it's lower or uppercase, it'll close the app. And one way to do that is just type app.delete. Let's go back and show you that. So let's recap. Click means go. Return means change direction. Escape means stop moving. And then Q means close the app. And again, I'm using this little trick just to control the timing with which it happens. I'm pausing for 1 second every time I take one of these actions. All right, so that's the basics of responding to key clicks and controlling the properties of a lamp indicator.